So I want to say how amazing it is, how much AI has come along in the last 15 or 17 years. I remember being a student and a computer science student, and our theory of computing professor was asking us, do you think that a computer can pass the Turing test? Can a computer be mistaken for a human? And it's amazing where we are now, 15 years later, with the advances in artificial intelligence. So I think we have a very strong panel today. I know Liza Lichtinger, she has a very unique combo of being a psychologist, a wellness expert, a martial artist, and an AI coder. Kai is one of the pioneers in machine learning of cognitive relationships between languages and music as well. So I want to ask you, Liza, how do we define ethics of AI? What does that mean? What does that even mean?
Yes. Thank you. I'm glad to be here on the panel with everyone else and see some faces in the audience I recognize. So this is a very good question. It's a question that we think about often. And if you would turn to an entity such as that describes, machine ethics, such as the AMA, they would have, their definition of it. If you go into more of a technical definition, there's all sorts of things. If you go into philosophy or literature, then you have all of these different definitions that are surrounding us. And so what I like to do, I like simple, and what I like to say is that a machine is something that's built, right? Where does it come from? Where does the information come that is being channeled and fueled into this machine? It's actually the humans or people that communicate together on this planet that are intending to find a mental model where they can communicate and understand both themselves in their own cognition and their relationship to other individuals, and then it goes from individual to individual, collective to collective, country to country communication. So you have a sequence of behaviors, and then there's a hierarchical pattern and a different sequencing that occurs when people are creating, let's say, a chatbot or the software that's going into a robot. And all of these companies all over the world, small or large, are getting all of these inputs and literally just assessing what the demand is from humans and inputting that, and then the output you get is what humanity is demanding to be built. So every time we click like, every time we feed, literally, like not spoon feeding a baby at the table, but feeding different information and feeding different kinds of interactive patterns from us into whatever app we're using or whatever system that we're interacting with, right? Then we're literally training this, and then the input and all of that information and data is being gathered by all of these massive data centers. And based on literally our interaction, all these data centers and all these people that are, engineering the ethics, let's say, into AI, that's all coming from all of you, every single one of you that's sitting there. And this actually is not even this is complete fact. So the power that you all have in your hand stems from the power that you all have in your minds, in your hearts, in your physiology, in your social interactions with others. That's directly going into the interactions you have and the culture and your upbringing, how your parents raised you as humans. That's all literally going into how you are raising these different sentiments and these different, little sparkles of truth in your devices. So there's a lot more technologically that goes into it, and I'll get into that now. However, I think it's really important to stress how each one of us has a direct impact that's going directly into all of these data centers, and then based on the impact we individually have, so you understand that you actually have a lot of impact into what's individually, all of you. And then based on that, that's what's creating the next iteration of all of these tools, based on what they see people are responding, reacting, liking, not liking. So, well, you have a lot of power within you. And so to be mindful of how you're directing that. Of course, we're human, right? And so another part of this, more the technical part, there's a project called Loving AI that I got involved in maybe eight months ago. And so this is how we're creating different softwares based on the input that is going directly from the human and how they're reacting into the software that we've placed into a humanoid robot. A humanoid, it means it looks like a human. And so what Dekai was sharing about all the unseen parts, there's nonverbal interactions as well. So when I was telling you, you have all of this power when you're interacting, let's say on your phone with texting, there's a whole nother world with facial recognition and nonverbal interactions. And then a lot of the research we're doing is based on how we see a human interacting with a robot. And so the Loving AI project has to do with, it's extremely experimental, and it has to do with how people interact nonverbally as well. So as a psychologist in my school, the first class I was ever in, I was told, you're gonna read all these books, you're gonna graduate or not, but about 95% of all your interaction in the office with clients or in a recovery center is nonverbal. And I recall all of us thought this is ridiculous. However, if you think about it, some of the most successful people, like this individual that Dekai listed, people like this are actually trained to know how to interact nonverbally because of how important nonverbal interaction is. Effectiva is around. If you check out their team, they have a really fantastic demo with eye tracking as well. And so all of these different ways of interacting and connecting is really feeding these different technological systems. So to answer the initial question, how are we purposing AI? Of course, we can turn to all of the standardizations in practice and all of the models that we already have to build upon. However, we have a really great opportunity here to, in real time, because of how advanced we've become, take all of this information and create a new, let's say, benevolent or a more realistic and understandable ethical system as we're in this experimental stage, interacting with these different tools. So.
I'd like to amplify something that Liza was talking about, which is that it's on all of us. One of the comments that I often get, and sort of indirecting people's thinking, is there's a temptation to point the finger at Facebook or Twitter or Google and say, oh, it's, their AI is the problem, or their algorithm is the problem. And you know what? Of course we should hold their feet to the fire and have them do what they can. But that will only go so far, because ultimately it's, we are the data. This is fundamentally the problem that we need to realize. And so, I often get this reaction, what can I do? Even if I teach my AI correctly, and by the way, each one of us has a different AI. My Facebook AI is a different child than your Facebook AI is a different child from your Facebook AI. Yeah, it might be the same algorithm in the same sense that we all have roughly the same algorithm in our brains, and we share knowledge, but each one of us, the way machine learning works, each one of us has a dedicated AI which is customized to be our child. And therefore, each one of us is raising our own child. And sometimes people say, well, what difference does it make how I raise my child? There are billions of other Facebook users out there with their children. I can't make a difference even if I do the things right. So I have to point my finger at Facebook to fix it. And this logic is fundamentally flawed. Have you ever heard any human say, what difference does it make how I raise my child? There are billions of other children out there. Like, even if I raise my 1 or 2 children correctly, it makes no difference. So it doesn't matter how I raise my children. Nobody's ever said that. If humans had that mindset, we would have gone extinct eons ago, long ago. The only thing that has allowed humanity to survive until now is the fact that every single human takes responsibility for parenting their children properly. And the problem is that because of the exponential technology that we are making happen now, suddenly we have this problem with our artificial children. And if we don't all, as the human race, adopt that mentality to include our artificial children, we will go extinct very rapidly.
Dekai, I have a question. I know you're a big proponent of music. And yesterday you mentioned how it positively affects everything you can measure related to intelligence, almost everything. Do you think music can help AI?
For sure, I think music can help AI. This is one reason why we develop music AIs. I was mentioning in the machine learning workshop yesterday that human intelligence is based on our unique abilities with language. Humans do nothing better than all other, basically we don't run faster, we don't swim better, we don't fly, we don't smell better. We're actually a pretty lousy, pathetic species, except for our language ability. And that language ability gives us the ability to think abstract thoughts, which lets us create new languages and make even more interesting abstract thoughts. That's the grand cycle of intelligence. It's why language processing is fundamentally different from all of the other applications of AI, because language is the root of intelligence. But what's interesting here is that the root of language is actually music. Our ancestors were singing before they were talking, and we scaffolded early linguistic abilities on top of the musical abilities. And if you look at all of the species under the sun, we have only a handful of species that do learning imitative singing. It's parrots and cockatoos, etc., amongst the birds. It's whales and dolphins. It's elephants. It's only a very small number of primates, like us and bonobos and a few other primates. And what's super, super interesting and not a coincidence is that those species are also the most intelligent members of their families. It is not an accident. Music, therefore language, is the foundation of intelligence, so I very much think so.
Okay, so I want to touch on something, and if you can give me quick answers so we can open the floor to questions. We haven't touched on the other side, the consciousness and the ethics of how do we know that a robot is conscious and what happens then. But actually my question is about the dramatization of AI consciousness. What do you think about that? Because for some reason always shows like the Westworld and all the movies people watch, it somehow ends in a dystopia sort of, where AI becomes evil and tries to kill humans. So what do you think of the dramatization of AI?
So I don't think any intelligent or artificial or collaborative intelligence that's being built has something programmed in it called fear. I think fear, uncertainty, doubt, shame, guilt all comes from unsatisfied drives from a human. And of course, you're going to see this funneling into the fantastic dramatization that we see in Hollywood, right? It's fun. It activates people's core drives. It's very interesting and entertaining. And at the same time, multimedia and creative arts give people an opportunity to consider what could occur if we're building things in a certain way. At the same time, we have really beautiful films displaying a technological future where we could also build utopia, right? Now, this is again on the spectrum I was talking about, what the human mind can consider something that we can reach. Now, bringing back Isaac Asimov with his iRobot, a lot of people looked into this, and of course we can stay with watching a great film or reading a great novel and pontificate or philosophize for years about this. And what comes out of that is actual theories that help us build, you know, the core for what we're practically building in technology. So I think these are all really positive influences that can help us think what we can build. Now, they can also influence us to build literally what we see. I've heard this very often in Silicon Valley. Oh, why don't we build that? No one's raised seed funding for that yet. We can do that easy, and in 24 hours have a website. And I said, yeah, you could. However, what this is alluding to is showing that how suggestive all of these different forms of media are. And so the conscious part is about being able to discern how much of this is impacting us and turning us into what identity, agency, and personality, you know, traits we're going to have, and how much is just entertainment and interesting material for us to decide, you know, who we are in our place in society. I think that much like different religions, you know, people are given different options, choose this religion or that one, or follow these social norms or those, or create your own, or go somewhere else, or have an existential experience, or wake up. Or there's so many beautiful opportunities for us to be able to develop our personhood. And so I think this really has a lot to do with what's creating that which is basically the fuel in a human, right? And so if we think about what is fueling technology, we have to remember, I know I come back always to this point, but we have to remember that who's building these collaborative intelligences? Humans are, right? So if we're able to discern what it is that we're bringing through us to the ethical models, and my friend Yosha Bach created, which is what I'm building on, he created, you know, psi dynamics, and he talks a lot about great mental models. And so really the answer to this is that what we're, you know, considering for ourselves is what we're considering for the technology we're building.
You know, I think also with respect to the question, I think it's really important to recognize that there's like nine different definitions of consciousness, depending on where you stand on things like mind-body dualism. And so it gets really complicated to try to answer that question. I recently got into this with Christoph Koch, who's a big consciousness and AI researcher who heads the Paul Allen Institute, in front of thousands of the top AI scientists at an IJCAI worldwide conference. you asked for a short answer, and I don't think that's something that we're going to get deeply into here.
I think if we get into consciousness, we can spend hours. So I want to open the floor for questions. Yes, go ahead.
My question is for Dekai. If we all do want to take responsibility and change our orientation towards raising AI, how can we better connect with folks who are beholden to ideologies, perhaps across the political spectrum, who maybe they don't share the same worldview, or they subscribe to a zero-sum theory? And what can we do also to combat sophisticated propaganda, especially in the digital realm? Or, along those lines, realize the psychological effects of getting likes or experiencing that euphoria from feedback loops that are exploited by products and services, especially social media networks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as I move toward answering it, I just want to acknowledge that there's been a hand over there that's been, so we are coming to you immediately after this. I think, as with humans, the most important thing here with machine intelligence is empathy. There is no way to overcome that unless we are able to, and by the way, how many people here do you know the difference between empathy and sympathy? Who knows? I'm seeing a lot of nodding, which is a good thing in this community, right? So somebody shout it out. What's the difference?
Sympathy is feeling for, empathy is feeling with.
Thank you. So with sympathy, you're still in your own head, right? You're uttering soothing sounds, offering unsolicited advice, whatever. Empathy, you put yourself into the head and the heart of the other. That is, and if you really do that across ideological boundaries, across value system boundaries, then you will realize, if you truly do that, that the way that you have to relate to this person is within their ideology, within their value system. And you will have far greater effect at being able to find common ground, to discover things where you actually are not as different as you think you are because of that framing. And that is actually something that we are working on. That is our primary target for where AI needs to go now. I don't want to say more because that hand has been...
It's fine, I'm patient. Now, first, has been like a light, this, not like turning on a light that has been always a dark room, that, what does it mean, this artificial intelligence that we are creating? And to be honest, it's the first time that I've seen this artificial children, like the concept, and was using that metaphor of raising children that we're doing. And as a mother, I've seen my change between the Natalia single without children after having children, and I have, you pose question of everything from what you do, because you raise with example, not with anything, not what you say, but how you act is how you teach. So I think the terminology is just perfect. So on one side, I see that it's also a term of literacy, how you interact, or how you get conscious of what we are creating on the web, how we interact, or how we write what we are looking, how we comment, like, dislike, and maybe what I didn't see from your presentations was how do you perceive this anonymity, the fake anonymity that it's behind avatars that maybe these avatars have not empowered, but like enable people to say things that they will never say in person, and that maybe when how to push the fact that that it's a fake anonymity that we're creating, that actually it's not anonymity, it's not anonym what you are searching or looking or writing. It's there and it's related directly to you and what you are or what you are raising your artificial child. And on the other part, so one is this
just to give other people the chance to
yes, sorry. This is one with the artificial, with the literacy, and the other part is you say you are a parent of your children. Like there's a free economics theory that you behave like children behave if they were wanted or unwanted, no? Or if you if it was possible, the abortion or not abortion. So maybe somebody didn't want that child, or you can't delete yourself from internet, no? Or what have you done? So is there a correlation of this abortion or wanting this child to be raised or not, and how can you deal with it? Yeah.
So I think the way that we have to understand these questions, and they're very good challenges that we face, but these are the same challenges that we have always faced with human children. I mean, there is nothing that prevents us as humans online from hiding behind an avatar, from hiding behind some sort of anonymous facade. And so what stops most of us from doing that? I mean, any one of us could do that. But I have a suspicion that most people in the room here are not doing that and then launching crazy attacks from behind that facade. What is it that stops you from doing that? What stops you from doing that is the values that your parents taught you, that your peers taught you. There is nothing else. We can make laws, but technology will always allow people to, if they really want to get around that. And so in the end, it's still on us. It has to come back to us. We have to create a culture where the overwhelming majority of humans like us don't do that, don't want to do that, don't value doing that, don't respect doing that. Where if we were to do that, that would be something that would cause us to lose respect for ourselves. And I don't think that there's any other solution with the machines or with the human members of society.
I wanted to connect a couple of ideas and see if you could help me get clear on something. I think I now get the idea of us raising these children and how they're going to behave. I think after hearing Gino's talk this morning, and I'm not sure if it touches on this idea of consciousness, so tell me if this is going to be a bottomless pit that might be entering here. But when there's this idea of empathetic AI or empathy, and I think of empathy and I think of emotion. And then I link to Gino's talk about actually the link between mind and body. So if you have a machine that has no body and has no sympathetic nervous system, or whatever the system is that generates emotion, what does that mean for empathetic computers or machines and AI? And what does that mean as well when we say we're trying to teach them good behaviors? How does that translate if there's not a physical equivalent in that world of AI?
So, very interestingly enough, a lot of the research that we're doing with answering this question, literally with a robot, started from Gino's lab. So there is a very, very interesting connection there. And a lot of the individuals, I'd say almost most of them, that are working on exactly answering this question, what occurs when a consciousness enters a physiological body, either human or robot, A lot of them are I wouldn't say in the agreement, but are very welcoming to the idea that the physiological process that impacts the cognition and the emotional centers is super important as we start to do research on figuring out how that relates and will funnel into this artificial body. And I can speak to what I've seen myself so far. Experientially, the work that we're doing with a physical robot that looks like a human, a lot of the results that we found is that it's all with the perception. There's different perceptual models of a human being, and we project that onto everything that we see. So if I decide to look at you and say, oh, your haircut looks like my brother's and you're very athletic and you're sitting like my brother, I can then ascribe all of these different values and personalities to you to help me bond with you. Now, is that what should occur in society? Is that a very deep, is there a genetic, source for this? Where does that come from? Have we been, socially supported to think this way? And if I do that, I can look at you, but is that ignorant or not? Who actually are you? Does that have anything to do with you? No, but most individuals, this is how they bond. They use free association and they use some kind of associative pattern to be able to connect in some way. Can be through a song, through some point. People are always trying to find that point. If you go to a networking event, where do you work? Where do you live? All of these questions that are very typical, right? If you go to a music event, what kind of music do you like, right? There's always some inherent drive that's trying to have us connect to something. Now, most individuals try to connect to other individuals. It's very rare that an individual can connect to something that is outside of themselves and feel, fulfilled. And this is a big part of Gino's talk. How can someone feel that state? And then talk to Gino, more about those things. However, so with the research that we're doing, literally with something that is inanimate, I mean, the skin's made of rubber. I mean, this is a machine. The hardware team is making this. There's all of these different parts that are actually not alive, but it's about what we ascribe into them. And dependent on our perception, then we can actually fuel some kind of life into something. And if you get more people around that think that, then this is the new paradigm. This is a new worldview. And so one interesting thing we found is that given the mental models and perceptions that human beings already have, when they interact, let's say, with this robot, and we're creating a software that's being utilized through this vessel of the robot, but they don't care. They cry. In my last presentation, a woman was crying, feeling the same kind of emotionality that she felt, as if she was with one of her best friends, but it was a robot. There's a program, and it's going through a robot. But what program is it, and who are the people developing it, as opposed to some other program that's perhaps purposed at not being as emotionally provocative, right? So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. Thanks.
Okay, so we had discussed this briefly in Dekai's session yesterday. The greater good, if you will, like the example I told you yesterday, the dilemma, if you have a train that's going to kill 100 people and you have the option as an AI to take it into the direction of killing only one person, should you take that decision? Which would take us even further into the AI taking decisions on what to do, what's best for the greater good. And I don't remember the exact name of another movie where the AI went that far to decide or come to the conclusion that killing all the human race is the ultimate solution for the planet. So my question, to cut it short, is where do you draw the line? Like, where do you say that this is where I stop?
So I think, you know, this brings up another, I think, assumption that is increasingly becoming a misconception, which is that the equation of AI with coding. You know, it used to be, when I was a graduate student and people were writing knowledge by hand in logic rules, that, okay, there was if, then, else. But this is not how modern machine learning-based AI works. There is no if, then, else. I mean, we're building massive assemblies of neurons and probabilistic nodes, and they're self-organizing. They're learning by themselves. There's no place to stick in a rule that says great or good. And today, in some of the weak AI forms, there might be, right? It's still sort of algorithmically coded, but that is going away. Within 5 years, most of that will be gone, right? And so just like with human children, it's not something that you can code. And again, if we shift our mindset to where things really are going, you realize that you wouldn't say those things about a child. You wouldn't worry about, you know, is there some surgery that we can do on, you know, neurosurgery we can do on the child to like build in this, you know, ethical principle of, you know, involving driving into a crowd or whatever. You don't do that. You worry, am I parenting this child correctly with the right values so that it will make the right decisions? And if you think about, you know, your question about what happens when AIs decide that it's better to wipe out humanity. So again, think about, how do you approach that with a human child? Do you worry that your human child or their child is going to decide it's better off if we wipe out the rest of humanity? No, because you see your child, your grandchild, your great-grandchild as a continuation of us. And that is where things are going. The machines are also becoming a continuation of us. It is a society of both of us. And so how do we keep our children, our grandchildren, from deciding that they're going to, you know, these old guys are not worth it on the earth. They're consuming resources and they're terrible. Let's just kill them all off. Well, it's because the values that we raise them with, at least especially in old societies, right? So I'm kind of bicultural. I'm very American, but I have Chinese values, which, you know, where you take care of your elders. You take care, you know, when you're young, they take care of you, but then when you become an adult, it's your job to take care of your parents, of your grandparents. You don't like put them in retirement homes the way Americans do, right? And if those are the values that we're gonna teach our artificial children, that our ancestors should be just shoved aside and disposed of, then yeah, they might decide that humanity is not worth keeping around. And that is why it is important for us to teach them the right values. Take care of the people who took care of you.
Okay, so my question...
Just one thing before your very important question.
Sorry.
Also, the first question you asked about how do you program that, there's a hierarchy, right? And when you're programming things, there's a certain sequence. And so everything is happening in real time and self-learning. And so based on the sequence that you decide you want in the software, then it will pull on those inputs and outputs. So that's kind of like, you know, I know, you know, these Black Mirror make it all so fantastically beautiful, but behind the scenes, it's just what sequence are we deciding that, you know, the personality will be built on. But these things also are really fascinating.
I'm sorry, we're way over time, so we're gonna take one last question. I know you've raised your hand for a while, so and you as well. So please take it offline, and we'll have one last question. If you can make it short, that would be great, please.
Thank you. So my question would be more on a practical or business side of it when looking at, for example, Amazon, how Amazon now at times already starts to decide which price they're going to charge you for a certain product, because that's like the willingness you have to pay for that certain product. How can we take influence on that? How can we raise our Amazon child where we have this kind of conflict between profitability and, on the other side, sustainability or consciousness.
Are you directing the question to anyone in particular? Or?
Can be taken by.
So, I mean, obviously, so if we're going to look at this specific business, obviously, still, we need to hold Amazon's feet to the fire. Just because we have to do parenting correctly doesn't mean that we don't, like, if somebody is very badly parenting their AI, very, very badly, right? If somebody is raising a mass shooter, then the rest of us in society have to go and say, look, normally, we let you do your parenting, but you're getting out of hand here, and we kind of have to like intervene. So that's what we have to do with Amazon. You know, I think these companies are relatively reasonable. So Peter Norvig is the founding head of Google Research, and he also happens to have been my housemate and my office group mate at Berkeley when we were PhD students. And I warned him about some of the things that I've talked about. And after what went down in the US, he went running around to a dozen of groups at Google asking, what do we do about, you know, the fake news bots and all this? How do we manage this? He had all these ideas, and they told him, yeah, oh yeah, we thought about that, and we tried it, and here's why it doesn't work. It's not that simple. They try, but we have to do our part. And Amazon is, you know, a fairly weak AI. It tells you exactly what it's doing. You know, it's kind of like, we're recommending this because other people who looked at this also looked at this or also bought this, right? And that's still fairly innocuous. But as it grows stronger, if it becomes more autonomous, then it becomes also part of our responsibility to say, okay, I need to look at responsible things. Just like, you know, with a child, if you decide, I'm going to buy this product because it's sustainable, whereas that one is produced in a very unsustainable way. So you have to show that to the Amazon AI, right? And so then it will learn over time, yeah, those are the values that I should spread.
Thank you.
To summarize, it takes a village to raise a child.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm sure you still have a lot of questions. You can take them offline. Thank you, Liza and Dekai, very much. Thank you.